This is the 10-Minute Law Firm Podcast, brought to you by Rocket Matter.
Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Larry Port from Rocket Matter. This is the 10-Minute Law Firm Podcast, and I have with me today again Jeff White, our Chief Revenue Officer. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, good, Larry. Hey, everybody.
So this is like part 3 of our multi-part series where we're talking about some of the big trend away from on-premise system.
Right.
And so, you know, we've come a very, very long way. So when Rocket Matter first launched back in 2007, 2008, I really, it was so funny because I remember like a lot of these systems were like, oh, never move online. And now they're forcing their user base to go online. So it's kind of funny. So with that, let's talk today about PCLaw. All right. So PCLaw was one of the big ones in the day. You know, does a couple things well. And so what do we know about it? Why are people leaving PCLaw, Jeff?
Well, yeah, and I think you hit on a good point. They do some things well, right? I mean, they have some nice advanced reporting features built into it, and they've got an install base. That system's been around. So, I mean, they have a version of it that's in DOS, for gosh sakes, you know, from way back in the day. But I mean, I think the people are leaving now, especially what's driving a lot of the conversation, as we mentioned in the first 2 podcasts, is now working remote surfaced a lot of issues inside of these products that don't have remote access, right? So that was one thing. I think another thing that you're seeing right now is that, you know, these platforms don't integrate with kind of best of breed technologies like G Suite, Office 365, or they don't do it that well, at least, right? So platforms that are natively cloud-based have a tendency to play better with other natively cloud device or platforms. And so I think that's one thing that we're seeing as well as a trend.
Now, the customers that are coming to you, so here's a little bit of the history I do know of PCLaw. So PCLaw was an independent product, was purchased by LexisNexis, I don't know how many years ago.
Yeah.
So it doesn't appear at this point in time, as of like 2020, that Lexis is much interested in investing in the future direction of PCLaw. They are slow to update the software, and you see a lot of complaints about that. There have been some very difficult releases that were very buggy releases that people have installed that have caused somewhat of an exodus away from PCLaw. What have you seen in the marketplace?
Larry, one of the things that we're seeing, I mean, we monitor the community forums that are out there, and we've seen that their last release that they had, specifically around Outlook and the native plugin they had there, it did break. They've had problems just continually with release after release as well.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of an issue because a lot of the firms that are on there, and I sympathize with them, that have been on PCLaw for 15 years. And that's not just like 15 years of being comfortable with the product. That's 15 years of data. That's 15 years of building firm processes around like how the product works. So when firms like, so we've seen some firms move over from PCLaw to Rocket Matter. Like, what would you say are some of the harder things for them to get their heads around, or you know, what are the challenges when they move over?
Yeah, I mean, really one of the big benefits they're going to see is automation, right? So like for us, we do workflows, right? And that's not a part of the PCLaw platform. So, you know, it's kind of looking at not just the accounting components of, you know, which PCLaw again does well, but what they need to look at is kind of firm-wide. How is the practice going to use a system where everybody's on the same page, right? So adopting things like our communicator platform, which is kind of our version of Slack, right? So a way of having collaboration on a matter, and then in addition to that, being able to even share documents or do video conferencing through that. Those are some pretty cutting edge features, especially for a PCLaw user. So what I recommend, if anybody is looking to make a migration, regardless if it's Rocket Matter or whatever SaaS platform, is kind of walk before you run. And that's going to be really tailored based on that onboarding experience.
Yeah, the one thing I would caution people is that not to expect kind of like a one-to-one correspondence between the features that they had in their old system, like PCLaw, to Rocket Matter, because you know, I think a lot of firms go into it, not a lot, but some firms go into it thinking like, okay, well, I used to be able to do things this way. How do I do that in Rocket Matter?
Right.
And you're not doing it the same way. You're solving the same problem, but you might be doing it a different way, and that's like a major distinction.
Well, and one of the things I think that's important is what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? So I mean, like, and the approach is really, somebody needs to ask that question to the firm instead of saying, well, hey, listen, I used to click A, B, and C to get this result. What we're trying to do is to say, okay, what is the issue that you're trying to solve by clicking A, B, and C? There might be a lot more automated way of doing that, you know, in a platform like Rocket Matter moving forward.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And the other thing is that, like, especially for the people in the firm that are used to doing things a certain way, it's really where we've seen firms get trip up over themselves if they don't incorporate the feedback of the heavy users of those products like early on. I mean, is there
Right.
anything you might want to say about that? Because PC law is especially that way since it's so high financially based.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's really, I mean, like, for example, we've seen this a lot from PCLaw users that come in, the native integration of Office and being able to capture billable leakage. So let's say, for example, there are people that are going to be in the firm that pretty much live in Outlook and Word. I mean, I'm sure some of our audience is going to be able to relate to that, right? That, yeah, I go into my matter management every once in a while, but I really live inside of Office. Having plugins which bring the practice management environment into those devices allows for easy capture of data, right? So that's going to be something that's really important. So as you start to look at these systems, look at ways to kind of work with inside your existing workflow that you have today. And then the system will really allow for you to see a quick return on it, which is really solid.
Awesome. And how complex is the data migration from PC law? I remember we used to try and do export files from it, and you'd be like limited to 8 characters because that used to be the character limitation in DOS. So of a system of that age, like how hard is it to migrate the data?
Well, it depends, right? So, but I mean, I've seen, like you said, that DOS format. We actually recently saw that. We did a migration off of one that was DOS related just a little bit over a year ago, and that's complicated and it's expensive. It's not easy. But it's also, there's really 2 components to come in a data migration. Kind of what are you willing to live without? So for example, like you mentioned the firm beforehand, or a firm that was 15 years on that platform, let's say hypothetically. Do you really need all 15 years worth of data, or is it appropriate for us to potentially take a snapshot from 3 to 5 years ago and use that as our migration? Of course, keeping historical records for conflict checks and things of that nature in the system, but maybe not all the atomic details of those files. So having somebody navigate that data migration conversation for you is going to be critical.
That's awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks so much. And if somebody wants to reach out to you about moving from a desktop product such as PC Law or another one, how do they reach out to you?
Yeah, just jeff@rocketmatter.com. So yeah, I'd be glad to help with anything you need.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thanks,
Jeff.
Thanks, Larry.
This is the 10-Minute Law Firm Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and don't forget to rate and review so we can keep bringing you awesome content.